All right, what's going on, everybody? I wanted to make this video to share what I found in diagnosing these issues I've been having on my F-150 in hopes that it saves other people a lot of hassle and time trying to diagnose it. So two issues I was having. I had the leaking exhaust manifolds, and I also had a chatter that I assumed was coming from the wastegates on the turbos, which is a common issue on these trucks. Seems to be a lot of common issues on these trucks. So this particular one, this is a 2015 F-150 Platinum with a 3.5 liter EcoBoost and select shift. I was having an exhaust manifold leak, and so I tore into that project. You could probably see them from up top here, maybe. But I've got new BD diesel manifolds that were installed, all new head studs, as well as a complete gasket kit for those BD diesel manifolds. So that's the gasket from the manifold to the head, gasket from the manifold to the turbo radiator coolant and oil coolant line gaskets, as well as all the radiator lines were replaced and all the O-rings and fittings associated with that. So that solved my first problem, which was the exhaust manifold leak. I had 5 snapped off head bolts, which were an absolute pain in the ass to get out, but we got them out by welding on some nuts and backing off those studs. The second issue I was having was a chatter that I assumed was the wastegates. However, after inspecting the wastegates, the arms, all the articulating points, when I had the turbos pulled from the manifold job, I found 0 issues with the wastegates. They're not rusted. The bushing in between the articulating arm down here had no issues and virtually no slop. So I got the manifolds, the turbos, everything put back together. I was still having an issue. It sounds very similar to wastegate rattle, which is a metal clanky noise. Almost sounds like, you know, throwing something metal down a pipe and bashing back and forth and making a rattling noise. A little bit more aggressive than a heat shield rattle than you would hear. Well, after several hours of diagnosing, I found out that it was a vacuum leak or an intermittently failing check valve for the IWE system. Okay, so how this works, the integrated wheel ends for the 4-wheel drive system, it is a spring-loaded IWE that sits here on the front, and that system is spring-loaded forward, and that's the locked position when it actually locks into the hub and turns the front wheels, which turns the CV axle shaft, which goes to the front differential, right, or the front transfer case. So Ford's system with the IWE, with the vacuum system, when it is not in 4-wheel drive, it is applying vacuum and pulling that spring-actuated IWE back so that it is not engaging the wheels, which then does not engage the CV axles, which does not engage the transfer case. Great design in theory until that vacuum starts to fail, and then you have this IWE intermittently engaging with the front hub when it's not supposed to, and that's what was happening. So I've got here this new part from Ford. So what I did to diagnose it, a couple of things. So here's your vacuum line, okay? This particular line, right, comes up into here, into the intake plenum, and it's pulling vacuum. It also goes to the back of the head over there and it's pulling vacuum. Check valve comes into a T, comes up to here. You have a second check valve, which then goes into the bottom of your solenoid. Then you've got a line coming out of here, which goes down and connects into both IWEs. So you've got an air vacuum line in the back of the IWEs. This is the electronic connection that goes to your 2-wheel, 4-wheel drive actuator switch inside your truck, right? So essentially, whether it's in 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, is either an affirmative or non-affirmative electrical connection to the solenoid, which then switches whether it's applying vacuum or not to the wheel hubs, to the IWEs. This stupid $5 check valve is intermittently failing. Okay, and the way that I tested that is I physically just removed it from this connection here. Okay, I came down here, I removed it from the bottom of the check valve solenoid, and then I removed it from the expansion, not the expansion tank. This is an air reservoir, okay? So you know if the reservoir is bad, by pulling this, you should hear vacuum coming out of here, right? You got air coming out of here because you're releasing the vacuum. I've already done that, which is why you don't hear it when I pulled it off. Then I simply blew in and out of this check valve connection here and air was passing both through and back through, which it should not be. It should not allow air back through into the intake, right? Or it should not allow it forward. I was wrong. So it should be, this is a one-way valve, but it was allowing air to go back and forth freely, thus intermittently engaging the IWEs. So this $22 part, that's 22 bucks from Ford, including all these lines and fittings. It's $5 check valve if you just want to replace the valve. It actually has a revision to the part, right? So here's your part numbers for anybody who wants to order one. Mine in particular is for a 2015, so I believe this is a 15 through a 2020. Might go higher than that. Comes with the new lines and the new check valve, and this is a revised check valve. All right. Another way that you can figure out if your vehicle is having this problem is in two-wheel drive, vacuum should be applied, thus disengaging the IWEs, correct? So if you're in two-wheel drive and you're hearing this chatter noise, put your truck into four-wheel drive, and if the noise goes away completely, you confirm that it is either a vacuum leak or an intermittently failing IWE. Because when you put it into four-wheel drive, this solenoid switches the vacuum so that vacuum is no longer applied to those IWEs and engages them into your wheel hub, all right? So that noise would go away. So that's a second way that I confirmed that it was a failing check valve. My IWEs, I manually applied vacuum with a Mighty Vac, and they were engaging and disengaging fine, so they were not stuck, which can also happen, especially in salty or wet or rusted environments where they get stuck. So I applied a hand vacuum to that and confirmed my IWEs were engaging and disengaging properly. Put it into four-wheel drive, did about a 10-mile drive, not a single issue. As soon as I switched it into two-wheel drive, intermittent IWE engagement. Okay, so those are the two ways you can check. Again, 99.9% of the time, it is a failed check valve. Okay, that's the first and cheapest part to start with. If the check valve does not solve your problem, you can also try replacing the solenoid. Okay, so this electrical connection comes undone. This air connection, which goes down to your IWEs, comes undone. You can pull that out. That would be a second step. That's a $40 part from Ford that you can try. A third way to check is to run a smoke test on your vacuum lines. So this going to the intake and to the back of the head, you can run a smoke test to make sure that none of those vacuum lines or fittings are leaking. You can also run a smoke test on this line going down to the IWEs. And a fourth way is that you can manually apply vacuum to your IWEs to see if you have a failing mechanical failure on those IWEs. So all this to say, I've probably got 5-6 hours into diagnosing this. Again, I originally thought that it was wastegate shutter, which is very common on these EcoBoost engines, and I confirmed that it was not when I pulled my turbos for the manifold job, and come to find out I had a bad $5 check valve. So hopefully this helps somebody in the future. All right, guys, thank you.